Hello, this is Mr. Lucas, and we are going to finish the full lesson comparing modernist and fundamentalist that we started today in class. Today in class, we were talking about 1920s Hollywood and fundamentalism. And then today, for the virtual lesson, we're going to be talking about the Harlem Renaissance as well as Prohibition. So this is intended kind of to be more independent, where in class we pretty much did everything together. Here I'm going to be reading things out loud to you, and then I expect you to be answering questions in the Ed Puzzle. So we're starting with the Harlem Renaissance. What was the Harlem Renaissance? Well, World War I contributed to the Great Migration of our African Americans from the South to the North. Motivations for moving included a desire for employment in factories and a push away from the lynchings, intimidation, and discrimination of the South. Black communities formed in cities where there was an outpouring of artistic contributions, such as jazz. Newspapers like The Crisis by the NAACP reported that the news and published the work of writers and poets. Harlem became the center of this artistic movement, now known as the Harlem Renaissance. Writer Zora Neale Hurston grew up in Florida and was a significant contributor to this movement. So let me read to you a poem by Langston Hughes. It's called One-Way Ticket. I am fed up with Jim Crow laws, people who are cruel and afraid, who lynch and run, who are scared of me and me of them. I pick up my life and I take it on a one-way ticket, gone up north, gone out west, gone. So here's kind of a question I have for you. Choose whether you think this information reflects modern or traditional views. We also might think how this relates to the other concepts that we already learned. Your answer might be something like people moved north and south to take charge of their own lives and find better opportunities. It was also about fighting for fairness and equality for all people. The Harlem Renaissance was a way to celebrate black culture and share it with everyone. Time for another multiple choice practice. We're going to stick with our strategy of answers without questions. We're focusing on the Harlem Renaissance, so my first mental filter must be the context of that movement, which is the Great Migration and the cultural flourishing it created. I'll start with choice A, ongoing discrimination in the South and job opportunities in the North. Do we think this is a true statement? Is there going to be discrimination in the South in the 1920s? Yes. Jim Crow laws are in full effect. Are there job opportunities in the North? Yes. Industrial jobs are the main pull factor of the Great Migration. Our conclusion would be this statement is factually true and highly relevant to the Harlem Renaissance origins. I'll give this a solid check mark as true. Now, choice B, conflicts with Native Americans in the West and greater freedom in the East. Conflicts with Native Americans in the West, that was primarily a 19th century issue related to westward expansion, not the 1920s Great Migration. Greater freedom in the East, true for African Americans moving north, but the first part is wrong. I'll put a question mark next to this one for now. Next, let's talk about choice C. It says, challenges to farming in the North and educational opportunities in the South. Challenges to farming, not the main topic. The major economic driver was the shift to industrial work. Educational opportunities in the South. Historically, Jim Crow made Southern schools segregated and often inferior. Education was often better in the North, making it another pull factor. This statement seems to reverse the historical facts. My conclusion on this one would be this is factually problematic and contextually weak. I'd cross it out as false. And then finally, let's look at answer choice D. Declining job opportunities in the East and government land offerings in the West. Declining job opportunities in the East. No, we know that's not true because the Great Migration happened because northern industries were expanding and needed labor. That's the opposite of declining. Government land offerings in the West. That's the Homestead Act, which primarily ended in the late 19th century and wasn't a major factor for African Americans in the 1920s. My conclusion would be both parts are misleading or factually incorrect, for the 1920s at least. So I'd cross it out as false. By answering the question choices before seeing the question, I've clearly identified that choice A as the only statement that historically is true and contextually relevant to the Harlem Renaissance. Let's go to the next slide to see what that question actually was. Which contributed to the growing population of African Americans in cities like Harlem? So if you kind of answered and followed along the way I did, you did excellent. We did excellent evaluating the four statements and finding out that only one was both historically accurate and true and relevant to the 1920s. Now let's reveal the question we were actually answering, which factors contributed to the growing population of African American cities like Harlem. We can look back at our analysis. The question asks for contributing factors to the movement that created Harlem's large black population. Our only true statement, ongoing discrimination in the South and job opportunities in the North, perfectly describes those push and pull factors that we've talked about. This confirms that even without reading the question, knowing the facts about the answer choices led us directly to the correct historical conclusion. So I hope you were able to use that strategy correctly. All right. The next thing that we're going to be talking about is prohibition. The temperance movement to ban alcohol originated out of a desire to address poverty, crime, and sin. Supported by progressives, the noble experiment was realized when the 18th Amendment prohibited the manufacture, transportation, and sale of alcohol. Drinking was not banned, and there were not enough enforcement agents to effectively monitor the sales. Bootleggers brought the alcohol across national borders, and speakeasies offered liquor sales within illegal nightclubs. Criminal organizations like Al Capone's profited from illegal manufacturing and sales. Ultimately, prohibition was repealed and ended by the 21st Amendment. So James P. Holland, Working Man's View of Prohibition in 1925. The working man is aware that laws, such as the Prohibition Amendment, are generally enacted for his particular benefit and to help him lead a moral life. He resents this patriarchal attitude and demands the liberty to shape his own standard of life. So the question, do we feel like this reflects modern or traditional views? Some answers might be, some people thought that banning alcohol would reduce poverty and crime. Prohibition was super hard to enforce. People found ways to get alcohol illegally. In the end, prohibition was canceled because it caused too many problems. It's time for our final multiple choice strategy. Question first, predict the answer. This time we're going to completely ignore the answer choices. We're only going to have the context, the quote, and the question. The context tells me that this is from a labor leader in the 1925 speaking about the Prohibition Amendment. The quote is key. Holland says laws like prohibition were passed to help the working man lead a moral life, but that the working man resents this patriarchal attitude and demands the liberty to shape his own standard of life. The question asks, which societal development is illustrated in the quotation? The term societal development means a major change in how people live or interact. What types of societal developments do you think might be in this answer? Based on the quote, I predict an answer that deals with these core conflicts. Freedom versus control. The key word liberty versus a patriarchal attitude that dictates morality. This represents the broader modern versus traditional values class we're studying. Working class resentment. It specifically mentions the working man resenting the wealthy or powerful telling him how to live. This links to the class conflict and individual rights. And then finally, prohibition failure. The statement implies a failure of law because people are actively rejecting it. What do you think the answer is going to be? Before I look at the options, I'm going to quickly brainstorm several possible ways the correct answer might be phrased. I'll look at the answer choice that matches one of these concepts. The working class pushed back against moral reform laws imposed by others. An increasing emphasis on individual freedom led to the widespread disregard of prohibition. The clash between modern personal liberty and traditional moral authority intensified in the 1920s. I need to hold these predictions in mind Now let's look at the answer choices and see which one actually aligns best with our predictions. Take a moment to consider the 4 answer choices and determine which answer you think is best. A, political debates on the influence of Hollywood. B, economic prosperity for the laboring class in cities. C, cultural classes between traditional and modern views. And then D, generational agreement with the temperance movement. Answer choice C comes pretty close to one of our predictions, the clash between modern personal liberty and traditional moral authority intensified in the 1920s. So C would be the correct answer. That's all I have for today's virtual lesson. You're more than welcome to stop here and answer those 4 practice vocabulary questions. You can also look at the long story short section, which tries to thematically and chronologically place a lot of these events. But that's all I have for you today. Thank you for listening. Please make sure you answer all of the questions.